So it is great, as I mentioned, to be here in Austin and share some of our stories about transforming the streets of New York City. And it is also great to be here with so many colleagues and friends. The NACDO is one big family, and it's just wonderful to share it here in Austin. You know, the work that I'm going to talk about tonight in New York City, it took many, many people to make it happen. There are almost 5,000 people that work at the New York City Department of Transportation. And many of the key leaders that helped make the changes that we made in New York City happen are here in this room. So I want the people from New York City DOT who are here in this room to raise their hands. No, higher. Higher. So now I want to get a sense from all of you. How many of you have been to New York City in the last 5 years? Last night. Wow. Wow. Well, so you guys have a sense of the kinds of changes that we have implemented in the city. And you've seen, literally, the new language that we have on the streets. In just a few years, you know, this has been a brand new vocabulary. New Yorkers have actually become fluent in the language of wayfinding and pedestrian plazas and protected bike lanes. And, you know, but it really wasn't always this way. And it's pretty hard to change the status quo, as the mayor noted, and to turn the big ship of a city in a new direction, especially since, like many cities, we had lots of infrastructure to maintain. As commissioner, I was responsible for 6,000 miles of streets, for 12,000 signalized intersections, 2 million street signs. What else? The largest passenger ferry operation, one of the largest in the United States, and 788 bridges. So it's a lot of infrastructure. And I actually want to thank my first deputy who was there managing it with me, Lori Ardito, who was there every step of the way and would not have made that happen without Lori there. So obviously, we needed to change the way we did business if we were going to continue to grow and thrive. We have 1 million more people that are expected to come to New York City by 2030, and we're not going to get there by doing the same old thing. And as one of the fastest growing cities in Texas, you know a little bit about what that challenge involves. And the mayor told me that you have 110 people moving here every day. And you are not going to meet the challenge of providing a world-class city and keeping Austin weird by doing the same thing that you did 100 years ago. And you really do need to move beyond this kind of dashboard view of our streets. And for decades, city leaders in many cities looked at streets like this and said, yep, working just fine. That looks exactly like it should. And, you know, sometimes it's really hard to recall that our streets didn't always used to be that way. In fact, they were more like shared streets, like extensions of our sidewalks. This is a picture of Lower Manhattan in 1900. And Congress Avenue, right here, really wasn't that much different. And this all changed with the invasion of the automobile. But the shift, it wasn't like this magical shift. It didn't just happen. This shift actually happened by design. These are planning documents from New York City in 1922. I love this. This is one of my favorite planning documents. And you know why? Because of this. First step, pedestrians are removed, right? And then second step, cars invade, right? This was our plan. It's sort of like Venice, but with traffic sewers instead of canals. And by the 1920s, it was very hard to imagine even crossing the street in places in Brooklyn like Grand Army Plaza. And it just got worse from there. The industrial design that we got from Detroit became the main consideration in the design of cities and the design of city streets. And automakers spent most of the 20th century convincing us that we had this love affair with the car, when in fact, I think it was really more of an arranged marriage. And this view was focused on moving as many cars as possible from point A to point B. This is Times Square in the 1950s, and by 2008, really not much had changed. This was before we did our redesign of Times Square. Our streets really have been in this kind of suspended animation for 50 years, and when you think about it, if you were in business and you didn't change your capital asset for 50 years, do you think you would still be in business? So, Mayor Bloomberg shattered the status quo when he launched his Plan YC long-range sustainability plan. And he recognized that we needed to work towards the streets that we wanted, the city we wanted, and not just the inherited Stone Age system that we had. And so we moved very quickly to translate the goals of Plan YC into a strategic plan for New York City DOT. And in fact, it was really the first time that the Department of Transportation had a strategic plan, which is sort of astonishing. Like, you didn't have a plan for where we were going. And so I really have to thank John Orcutt, actually, who's the policy director, for being really key in helping us design the policies, the programs, and the benchmarks so the public could hold us accountable for what happened on their streets. And we focused on building a world-class bike network, a world-class bus network, creating pedestrian plazas, making it easier to get around, and really improving the safety on our streets. And I think one of the things that we became most known for was our rapid transformation of city streets. And moving from years and years of planning studies. You all know how that can go, like years and years and years of planning studies before anything happens. And we sort of flipped that by changing the use of the street very quickly with stones and planters and paint, because that's the key, is to show the potential of that street. And the proof of the success, the proof of the performance, isn't a computer model, but it is how it works in the real world. This was one of our first projects in Dumbo. And I have to say, I don't know how it is here in Austin, but New Yorkers got really tired of waiting years, generations, to see change happen on their street. I think they'd given up, right? I mean, we were like on our fourth groundbreaking of the 2nd Avenue subway, right? So the notion that, yeah, Plan YC, you're gonna green your streets, right, you know? So it was really important to make the promise of Plan YC into a reality, and show businesses in local neighborhoods what could happen so that they could reap the benefits of safer streets and more foot traffic toward their businesses. So we did this all over the city. This is in Lower Manhattan, where we created the street seats, very much taking a page out of Ed Reskin's work in San Francisco, to Madison Square, which was one of the widest intersections in New York City. And we coned it off in 2008. I love this picture because we put the orange cones out there, and this art class just out of nowhere, right? It was like Star Trek. No one there, and then zoom, everybody's in there, and they're sketching away at the Flatiron Building. It just showed how hungry people are for public space. And today, it is one of the most successful public spaces in the city. And in fact, people will sit in the street, in the plaza, instead of going to the park, the beautiful park that's next door. It's really an extraordinary program and project. So these new spaces were in demand all across the city, and we focused a lot of our work in distressed neighborhoods where there was really no green space, in places like Corona, Queens, and the foot of the Williamsburg Bridge, which was one of the most dangerous crossings in the city, and we just added new pedestrian space, improved the crossings. We actually created 60 new plazas all over the city, and it was one of the most in-demand programs at the Department of Transportation. And it's interesting because one of the things that we did was to flip how it is that government delivers services. So normally you've got like the Department of Transportation that goes in, talks to communities, and moves forward with the program, right? So what we did was, after showing the potential and showcasing some of the possibilities on New York City streets, we converted the program into an application-based program. So neighborhoods applied to us for plazas and bike lanes and the other programs. And it's a really powerful way to engage the public and get them involved in the programming. So 60 plazas, and I will add one note, or Andy Wiley-Schwartz would kill me, because Mayor Bloomberg was adamant that we created new public spaces, but that they had people that maintained them, that cared for them. Because in the 1980s in New York City, there was a lot of public space that was created, but there were no maintenance partners. And so they very quickly turned into distressed areas, garbage pits, and it was really an ugly thing. So going forward, we actually established a neighborhood plaza partnership program, and you should find Andy Wiley-Schwartz. Where's Andy? There you are. Did a great job at getting communities to come together and came up with new ways to actually make this maintenance model work. So these plazas went very quickly from temporary materials all the way through construction. And I think the point is that it takes a long time to get through a capital construction program. In New York City, it's 5 years. So if we had waited the 5 years, we'd still be talking about many of the projects that we actually have in the streets today. This sparked a downtown renaissance, culinary renaissance, retail renaissance. In Brooklyn, we saw the same results happening on Broadway, where we turned Broadway into a boulevard, and it became a welcome space for residents and tourists alike who flocked to the shops. And we found in project after project that better streets are better for business. More foot traffic is better for business. This is the area outside of Macy's, which we turned into a miracle on 34th Street, as I like to say. Yeah. And foot traffic went up 6% in just 6 months. And it showed what's possible if you don't force people to fight over scraps of sidewalk space. And that was especially true in Times Square. 365,000 people going through Times Square when we did this project. 365,000 people a day. And 90% of the people going through this area were on foot, and yet they only had 10% of the space, just 10% of the space. And so it was this tangle of traffic. It was this Gordian knot of traffic, and nothing had worked. For years, people had tried to slip lanes, turn lanes, traffic signals, whatever, and nothing worked. I am convinced that there was ox cart traffic on Broadway, going back in time. That's how bad it was. So we decided to try something new, close it to cars from 42nd to 47th Street, take Broadway literally out of the system, where it cuts as a grid through the street grid that we've got there, and we would measure the results. We would do it as a pilot, as Mayor Adler said. And if it worked, we would keep it, and if not, we would put it back to the way it was. And as the mayor pointed out, and that's my mayor, we're measuring it. So, and I have to say, he did this in the middle of a re-election campaign. So you might imagine what the conversation was when we're going around City Hall at the table. I don't know if the mayor has one of those tables where you ask all the deputy mayors what they think. You can imagine what the deputy mayors thought about closing Times Square to cars in the middle of a re-election campaign. I think it really just shows the political courage and following the data. Got the cones out there and we looked out. Oh my God, there's nothing there. There's just asphalt. This is going to be a disaster zone. What are we going to do? Well, so some smart people got together and said, but we're going to go to a discount hardware store, and we're going to buy some beach chairs. And so we bought $10.99 beach chairs at Pinchink Hardware Store. And so the next day, we put them out, and surprise, it was this huge hit. And everybody loved him. But I got to tell you, with the media, a very important lesson, because the media only talked about the beach chairs. Do you like the beach chairs? The color of the beach chairs, size of the beach chairs? Nobody talked about the fact that we'd closed Broadway to cars. Right? Who knew? Beach chairs. So I'm telling you, any big projects you've got, beach chairs. Think beach chairs. You'll be just fine. Just fine. So it became this instant success. And we did all sorts of concerts, and even New Yorkers, grumpy old, curmudgeonly old New Yorkers who said, I would never be caught dead in Times Square. I was trying to do that with a Texas accent. It didn't work. Anyway, they came, and they were out there. And it was a thing of beauty. And it was an economic blockbuster as well, very important for the business community. 6 new retail stores moved in tons of increased revenue. It became one of the top 10 retail locations on the planet, according to Cushman and Wakefield. We had a great business improvement director, Tim Tompkins, who did great work on the programming side with doing things like, yoga in Times Square. There were these great volunteer programs that we had going on, and open air opera in Times Square. And so you can really see the possibilities that are hidden in plain sight in a city, moving from endless asphalt, to this thriving plaza. And now we've got the permanent construction underway, and so you've seen part of it, and there's more to come. So I really invite you to come and see it for yourself. It's really going to be quite extraordinary when it's finished. And I have to say, in fact, I still have one of those beach chairs in my office. So it is a piece of New York City history, but it is a piece of history that any city can use. But as the mayor noted, even Broadway hits can have some bumpy periods, and some of you may have seen some of those local headlines. We had some problems with these costumed Elmos, and some women very much out of costume. And so we had some people say that the way we needed to solve this problem was to just rip out the plazas, right? And so some people, they thought it was kind of like, it was like solving the problem with squirrels with just like tearing out Central Park, right? Or like the selfie stick problem in Paris. We'll just, remove the Eiffel Tower. So, that was the strategy there. And it was really interesting to see how many New Yorkers from all over the city rushed to the defense of these plazas. And such a big change in 6 years, from people who thought we were crazy to close Times Square to cars to people who thought it was crazy to open it back up to cars. And I'm happy to say that they're here to stay. And this transformation in New York City was just as much about providing more options for helping people get around, and by bus and by bike, and making it possible to just leave your car keys at home. So we took streets like this, where it was sort of bike at your own risk, and we turned them into this, making the street work better for everyone on the street. And these protected bike lanes had a dramatic effect beyond the bike lane itself. And so we found that injuries to all users, not just cyclists, went down 50% on every lane where we put in protected lanes. And retail values went up 50%. So it is part of an economic development strategy for cities. And we tailored our designs to meet the needs of cities. It wasn't of streets. It wasn't the same design all over. So narrow streets, we would paint high visibility lanes. On wider streets, we could take, a wider palette. We built in two-way connections, really created this interconnected network, a really true bike backbone for New York City. And we did that from places like Chinatown to all the way to the east side. And what happened to the east side? Oh well, we did it on the east side. And this is one of my very favorite projects. And it's probably the most famous bike lane in the world. The most famous bike lane in the world. You heard the mayor say some of our transition work, but what we did is we took basically this speedway. It was the community asked us to come in and deal with the speeding cars and the people riding on the sidewalks. It was a mess. And so they asked us to fix this like 5 times. And so we came in and we fixed it. And we put in this two-way protected lane, and guess what? Speeding went down, ridership tripled, it was fantastic. Today it's one of the best rides in the city, and Ryan Russo from New York City DOT deserves a huge congratulations for getting this done. But, and there is a but, as many people know here in this room, when you push the status quo can push back really hard. And so Prospect Park, yes, one reporter called it the most contested slab of concrete outside the Gaza Strip. And the press continued to milk it for all it was worth. And if it wasn't for Seth Solomano, Nick Muscare, and the press team, I think we wouldn't necessarily have gotten through it. And we heard every single reason why these bike lanes wouldn't work. Some people said it's going to be so many people in the lanes that it's going to be dangerous. And some people said it's going to be nobody in the lane, so why put them in? And some people said both things, which was really weird. And we also heard some new objections. Incredible. Yeah. This is a member of the editorial board at the Wall Street Journal. And she famously introduced a new word into the transportation lexicon, begrimed. Yeah, she said that these bikes and these bike stations were an eyesore that begrimed the city. And she also said, I love this, that the bike lobby in New York is an all-powerful enterprise granted free rein by a totalitarian mayor. Right? I mean, doesn't get any better than that. So it became really surreal at times. And I have to say, fortunately, we had great support from community leaders and activists, people like council leaders Brad Lander. And I know we've got some progressive, really smart council members in the room, and so I thank you for your leadership. Community leaders like Eric McClure and advocates like Paul Steely-White, Clarence Eckerson, who did an amazing job with street films, incredible job really getting the message out. And we also had data on our side. And so you can see here that the more people on bikes and the more bike lanes you put down, the safer your streets are. It's a very clear correlation. If you want a safer city, build more bike lanes. Yeah. So that's what we did. And in 6.5 years, we built almost 400 miles of bike lanes. You can see the system in 2007 and in 2013. I love doing this because it's so easy. Yeah, just bike lanes. Just put them all in, no problem there. Yeah. So by the end of the administration, though, after all of this change, all of this churning, it was amazing to see how much the people were ahead of the press and the people were ahead of the politicians. You can see the numbers here. 73% support bike share. You see 72% support the pedestrian plazas. Even 64% approving of bike lanes. If this was an election, it'd be a landslide. It would be a landslide. Good projects will outlast bad headlines. And you really just have to stick to your guns. And we're seeing cities around the world adopt these kinds of strategies. St. Louis, you're seeing it in Tucson, you're seeing it in Arlington, Virginia, and close to here in Houston even. And right here at home in Austin. And I've been so amazed seeing this great network of protected lanes that you all are creating, building in better mobility for everybody on the street, and it is really important investment. And part of that better mobility comes from bike share systems, which are exploding around the United States. And this is a picture when we launched bike share on Memorial Day in 2012. And it's a really interesting story. So, I worked for a very tech mayor, and, but sometimes when you do press conferences, I don't know if you have any experience with this, it doesn't always go so well, so sometimes you press the button for the thing to happen and the button doesn't press. So our press office was very concerned about that, and so they didn't want the mayor to actually put the key in the thing and pull into the station and pull the bike out. They begged me I'll do it, just Janette, you do it. So I said, okay, I'll do it, and the mayor was like, if the system doesn't work for me, then it's not going to work for the rest of New York, and I'm going to make that key work. So, you see this picture here. Actually, we had all these cameras there. It was incredible, and I am standing behind the mirror in all the pictures. I'm like this. I am just praying. I am praying and praying that this works. And it worked, and in 2 years, we've seen people take 22 million trips on City Bike. It's really impressive. It's really impressive. And the team that did that is also here. And one of the things that's really impressive, too, is that we did an incredible amount of outreach. We did the most outreach in New York City transportation history. 65,000 people made recommendations about where these bike stations should be, in addition to hundreds and hundreds of community meetings. And Kate Villeneuve, who's here, Kate, you have to raise a hand, She can give you any details on how to get it done because it was really impressive. And I've been really impressed with the success of the system here, which I hope, continues to grow. And, the B-cycle system really, I think, looks great. Buses, and I'm sorry, we do have to talk about buses. They were another big focus of our work. We had the largest bus system in North America, and we had the slowest bus speeds. In fact, you could actually walk across town faster than you could take the bus. And that happened actually. Actually, there's a yearly competition with a trike and a bus, and the trike always wins. It's embarrassing. In fact, my transportation, my traffic engineer used to say, the only way to get across town was to be born there. So, really not the mark of a world-class city. So we got to work creating this rapid bus program, and we rolled it out. We built 7 lines in 6 years, and dedicated lanes, off-board fare collection, so you paid before you got on, camera-enforced lanes, so if the drivers were in there, they got ticketed. It was great, and great results. This is from our first project on Fordham Road in the Bronx, and it was great for retail sales also. Retail sales along the corridor, like in every city, when you take away parking, it's like you're taking away somebody's firstborn child, right? And so we took away parking here, and so businesses said they're all going to go out of business. Guess what? Retail sales increased 71% across this corridor. Really important message. Because the fact is that cars don't shop, people do. So when you build better transit options, people come. This is also a great project. There's the First Avenue project. See? Before and after. I love that. You've got the dedicated lane, you've got the safe crossing. I remember when we launched Bike Share, I was riding up that bike lane, and we're riding along, and the cars are flowing, the buses are going, and the people are on the pedestrian islands. There's rainbows and bluebirds, and it was just like unbelievable. And so, it's powerful to see what you can do, even just repurposing your existing assets just a little bit, just by reallocating the space on the street. Also by taking care of the infrastructure that you put out there. And so we focused a lot on good design. So making really attractive bus shelters, making very attractive, bike shelters, and also focusing on newsstands, which was done with a vendor who is also going to provide over $1 billion to the city over 20 years under this program. We also focused on benches. New York City is known as a great walking city, but there is no place to sit down. Right, which is not great news for parents with kids, anybody, so you see people just sitting on these fire hydrants. It's sad. So we installed 1,000 new benches, and we also got to work designing new bike racks. Our old bike racks looked like some crazed plumber had put some weird thing in the concrete. And our streets can also, and this is important, provide unique opportunities for artists. And I think that's especially true here in Austin, because you're this hub, you're this artistic hub. And we found that they can be a canvas for really creative interventions in public spaces. And Wendy Foyer from New York City DOT has done a great job of working with our local artists, and I encourage you to get in touch with her if you're interested in that program. And so we worked with our bridge facades. We even worked with the lowly New Jersey barriers. And hundreds of volunteers would come out to paint these barriers. We worked on the fencing around our equipment yards, and we did work on our bike share stations. And we also commissioned artists to take our streets in new directions. This is in Times Square, a great program done by Molly Dilworth, and it's called Cool Water, Hot Island. And she basically translated a heat signature map that NASA took and put it into color. And so those colors are this river that ran through Times Square. Very cool. We also created the Summer Streets program. How many of you have ridden in the Summer Streets program? So you've seen, we closed Park Avenue in the summer on Saturdays from the Brooklyn Bridge to Central Park, and I encourage you to come the first 3 Saturdays in August. And it really does show also you don't have to use your streets the same way all the time. And you've got a lot of opportunity here in Austin. I'm hoping you do a kind of car-free streets program, because it's really incredible to see the imagination that comes along with it. And every year we always try to up the ante, so putting in things like zip lines on our streets. And my favorite, the pop-up pools. So people would really literally swim in the shadow of Grand Central Terminal in the heart of Midtown. And all of these projects and programs, they made dramatic changes to our streets, but most importantly in the arena of safety. And focusing on the safety of our streets was one of the most important things that we did. And we had big successes. And a lot of that came from our targeting our interventions. We actually commissioned the largest pedestrian safety study ever done. We studied 7,000 crashes, and it became the Rosetta Stone for us, the sort of who, what, why, where, when of crashes. And the result was that traffic fatalities from 2001 to 2013 fell 30%, the lowest in New York City history, since New York City kept records at the turn of the century. And yeah, it's really great work. It's really great work. And I am thrilled to say that the new administration is built on that foundation with Vision Zero, and continues to push the envelope with these great interventions. So, I work for this data-driven mayor, as he likes to say, trust in God, everyone else bring data. And so we spent a lot of time measuring the impact of these changes on our streets and going beyond just counting cars. And so focusing on safety impacts, on retail impacts, taking a look at what happened with vacancies, measuring public opinion. And that was a really big factor in getting public buy-in for our project. So we went from anecdotes, people like cabbies in New York City saying like, oh, you close Times Square traffic, it's Carmageddon, it's horrible. But when in fact we actually had the studies to show that it worked. So we went from anecdote to analysis, and it was really improved. And Bruce Schaller deserves a lot of credit. I don't know if Bruce is here. Bruce? Not here? Anyway, he did a lot of work on that, and I urge you to follow up. It's also on the DOT website. And importantly, these studies actually turned small business owners into some of our strongest allies. And all of these lessons were captured in NACDO's Urban Street Design Guide and Bikeway Design Guide, along with the lessons learned from lots and lots of other cities. Gabe Klein's work in Chicago and DC, and I really want to thank Linda Bailey and the entire NACDO team for their work, because it led to this flowering of innovation all across the country, and focusing on what's possible on city streets, really moving from the renderings to reality. And there's really strategy is about flipping the old hierarchy on its head, where instead of focusing on moving cars above everything else, to prioritizing people on 2 feet and 2 wheels and in transit above cars. And last week we announced the latest addition to the NACDO library, the Global Street Design Guide, thanks to Sky Duncan and her crew here. Woo! And it provides great guidance for cities of all sizes and shapes and stages of development, and it's really exciting. So I think we're at this really important moment, this sort of urban revolution. And it is really exciting to see what Austin has underway, translating these principles into new projects on the ground with bike and bus and pedestrian programs. And I think it's even more exciting to think about where you go from here. And you have the leadership of Mayor Adler and the Downtown Austin Alliance. And you have, yes, and you have the vision, to capture the incredible opportunities that are hidden in plain sight on your streets. And with the energy of everyone in this room, you can make it happen. Let's make it happen. Let's get to work. Thank you.